We are so excited for today's episode because we get to welcome one of our favorite people. She's sitting right next to us. It's our mother. You can tell. Her name is Jasmine Alvarez, and she has been truly our greatest gift here on earth. Honestly, I think about my mom as she is truly God's glimpse of heaven for us and everyone she meets and comes in contact to. So I am just so excited that we get to share her with you guys today. And she's been in ministry for 30 years. We were laughing at how time has flown. And she has been, like I said, a gift to so many people. I would say the greatest description of my mom is, we call her Saint Jasmine. Yes. Because she truly is a saint. She is a joy and a walking angel. And we're just all very, very lucky to have her. So we are excited.
We're so excited. Today we get to talk about something that my mom has spoken to us about throughout our entire lives, which is marriage. And we thought, Alexa and I was thinking, like, who better than our mother than to speak about a godly, Christ-centered marriage. And we've gotten the gift of witnessing how you go about being a godly wife day in and day out behind the scenes and can testify that you are the real deal. And so we're just so honored, Mom, that we get to sit down with you. And we just love you so much. I also want to share, too, is that, Mom, your marriage with Dad has honestly been one of your greatest ministries. And it has touched so many lives, like what Alexa said, through elementary school, to people's parents that we knew, to college, to like the workplaces that we've been in, and then the hundreds of women that you have impacted. So thank you for taking the time today. Just as we open up, I'd love to hear from you, Mom. Could you share a little bit more about why you're so passionate about marriage?
Thank you. I'm trying not to cry because your words touch me deeply. And I have so much respect for my daughters. And for you to say that, I feel very touched and emotional. I'll try to put that aside. Ask me the question again.
Why are you so passionate about marriage?
You know, I was thinking about that. And I think it started when I was a little girl. I really didn't see a good example of a healthy marriage. My dear mom lost her husband, my father, when I was 3 years old. My mom was 27 years old, and she was left with 3 children, all very young, and in a foreign country for her. So one of the things I just want to say off the top is that I have never, ever felt unloved by my parent. And that's a tribute to my mom. I have always felt deeply loved. With that being said, I can remember, and I can vividly remember where I was sitting. I was in a car. I was very young. The car was parked, and I was looking out the window, and I had a thought. And the thought was, when I get married, I'm going to treat my husband like a king. Now, let me just explain that. I never really saw up close what a healthy marriage looks like, but I saw it from a distance. I would see it, for example, behind a car seat when my friends' parents would be driving me somewhere, and I would see them interacting together. I've seen it in different ways like that, and I've always pined to have that type of marriage. So with God's grace, I met a wonderful man, and I got married when I was 20 years old. And my husband is one of 7 brothers and 2 sisters. And that was another way that I was able to see a healthy marriages, and all of them, very beautiful, healthy marriages. But the problem was for me is that I was trying so hard to have a marriage that was perfect. And I didn't know Christ until 10 years after I'd been married. I came to Christ when I was 30 years old. And God did something very beautiful for me. I remember this time, He saw how passionate I was about loving my husband. He saw how hard I tried behind the scenes. I was very sincere of wanting to love my husband and treat him with the utmost honor and respect. And I remember God, I don't want to be tearful about it, but I remember God. If I can give you a visual of what God did for me, he went like this. He kind of like tapped my chin to go higher, and he kept on tapping it until I landed right on God's face. And he said, I'm your king. Love me with all your heart, your soul, and your mind, and your strength. And then, what was so beautiful is then I felt like God pushed my head down towards my husband, and he said, now go love your husband. And that right there is what I want whoever's listening to take that away. If you don't take anything else away, is that no matter if you come from a good family situation where you've seen your parents have a good marriage, if you come from a situation where it was dysfunctional and you did not see your parents have a good marriage, if you come from a family where it was a single parent, everyone needs to have God as the king of their life. After that, then whatever you go through in your marriage, you and God can handle that together. And what's so beautiful about that is because the idea of marriage, what didn't come from man, it didn't come from Hollywood, it didn't come from the romance novels, it came from God's heart. Marriage is God's idea. He knows exactly how hard it could be at times, and he knows what a blessing it can be. And Alexis, you shared something that was just so powerful earlier today. And could you share?
Yeah, I'll pull up the quote. It was a Tim Keller quote from his book, The Meaning of Marriage, which is a really fabulous book. And it was a quote about I'll read it for you right now. It says, the reason that marriage is so painful yet so wonderful is because it is a reflection of the gospel, which is painful and wonderful all at once. The gospel is this: we are more sinful and flawed in ourselves than we ever dared to believe, yet at the very same time we are more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than we ever dared hope. This is the only kind of relationship that will really transform us.
I love that.
And that speaks exactly to what
it's exactly
you were describing.
And I could say that my husband and I have a wonderful marriage, but it's still hard at times. And everyone could attest to that. Julie, you've been married 1 year. You've been married almost 10 years. And you could say that it's wonderful. And for them too, it's hard, I'm sure.
Yes.
But the point is this: it's hard at times, but it's also the most rewarding and wonderful relationship that you'll ever have.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think we were talking about this week about how a lot of times we hear, especially in culture right now, that marriage is so hard. It's the hardest thing anyone has ever done. And so we were talking this week about how maybe hard doesn't even begin to define what marriage is. It is hard, but I think maybe a better word we could say is challenging.
Yes.
Because it challenges our growth. And I think that's what makes it so hard and difficult, is the growing pains you experience within that context of marriage.
It's true.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I have made so many mistakes in my marriage. My husband has made so many mistakes in our marriage. But God is our king. And God has defended, protected it, and he has held us together. And I can honestly say it's wonderful. And I believe God's heart is for a husband and wife to become one. And I could say after 40 years, through all our trials and tribulations, we have become one. And that is the goal. As soon as you say I do, it's becoming one. And sometimes that's hard, becoming one. Because many times you have to die to yourself. One of the things that's really important to me, girls, and I know we've talked about it before, is the tone that we have towards our husbands.
And please dive into this more.
This is very practical.
Yes, please dive into this
Well,
more.
You had said so many beautiful things about me. Can I say something beautiful about you two? One of the things that that really has touched my heart is I could hear, like sometimes we're together and I hear your husband call you or your husband call you, Alexis. The tone that you have with them is so beautiful. You're like sugar on that phone. You're like, hi. You're happy to hear from them. And it to me, that just like, yes, that is a way to practically defend your marriage. Now, what happens if you don't feel like you want to be kind, or you're upset with them? That is where you have to strengthen yourself in the Lord and think about, what do you want to take place in the future? How is that response that you're going to have with your husband going to affect the next 15 minutes of your relationship, or the next 30 years of your relationship? How is that going to affect it? And I have a little story, if you don't mind me sharing. I remember, and this was many, many, many years ago, one of a lady who was in ministry, who's no longer, she moved away, and like I said, I'm not going to mention her name, but it was very typical of a lot of women, a lot of us, and how we respond. But anyway, she came into the house, we were on the couch, we were talking, and we were having a very pleasant conversation, and all of a sudden the phone rang. And it was her husband, but I didn't know it was her husband. And she was so rude to this person on the other end. I thought it was her teenage son. I didn't know who it was. But she was so short and rude with this person. It scarred me. It scarred me when I found out. I said, oh, who's that? She goes, my husband. My heart broke, because I feel that that your husband should get the best of you, not your friends.
And vice versa.
And vice versa. Thank you.
For all these things.
Exactly. It goes both ways.
We're talking about women and
right
wives.
now. Yes. And we could talk about men too. But I'm talking about what is our part. They have their part, and I believe that their part is even bigger in God's eyes,
more challenging
as the initiator, and even more challenging. But I'm just talking about women. Is they deserve, in my mind, to get the best of who you are. You know, wife takes some type of intelligence. Yes, because you can't just react any other way you feel. You have to be wise and thoughtful about how you're going to respond to your husband, and how it's going to affect, before you have children, your relationship, but after you have children, how is that response going to affect your children? What tone is that being set in the home?
You know, it's so true. Something I really have learned, even I'm just a year into marriage, and I've looked up to these two so much in their marriages for wisdom and guidance. And I really believe that wives who have, poured into the marriage and chosen to move towards their families and their husbands are true warriors. And truly, it takes more strength.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so now when I see a couple that has been married and they're, close at their age, I'm like, wow, that is a warrior woman. That is a strong woman who has a lot of savvy, and there really is an art to marriage. And I've seen you both exemplify that.
And I think too, when we were talking about how we approach our husbands, I was often thinking, like, we approach, as women, so many people throughout the day. We approach friends, family, even like the people we run into the grocery store. Sometimes better than we do our own spouse. And I think that when we start coming back to the basics of, okay, there's a common sense and common courtesy and a common understanding that we treat people. You need to treat people well. Treat people the way you want to be treated. The golden rule. We teach our children this. It's such a basic principle, but for some reason, within the context of marriage, it is the last thing we think about sometimes. How am I treating my husband? And am I treating him the way that I want to be treated? That is a very basic principle, but we overcomplicate it sometimes, I think, within marriage, because we let our emotions, our feelings, our hurt feelings maybe at times, our feelings of maybe resentment or bitter, whatever the context of our marriage, and it could be in the good and the bad. But we let that fog the basics.
Absolutely.
That really, that's all you really, that's what a recipe for success.
It's true.
Treat others the way you want to be treated.
It's true. And I feel like God gave me a different perspective of that little girl sitting behind the back seat of the car, watching an interaction of a married couple, and how beautiful it is, not only to the children, but to the world who's watching. It's a beautiful example of God's heart for marriage.
That's true.
But I wanted to say is, what happens when the husband is not doing his part?
Yeah, that's
what
tough.
what does God call us to do? Where, like, I'm not saying that he is. Let's just say he's maybe selfish, more on the selfish side, or maybe if nothing to do with being any type of physical abuse or emotional abuse.
Right.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what happens if maybe he's diving so into other projects that you feel neglected. How would God want us to respond to that?
Mm-hmm.
I would first say, and then I want you guys to speak about it too, I would first say is that your marriage is extremely important to God. Extremely important to God. And He cares about how you are treated in the marriage. It's very, extremely important to God. And so first know that. And having God as the king of your life, you are able to go before His throne and talk to Him and cry your heart out to Him. And God would love to help answer this prayer of yours. So first of all, I want to say that, is it always easy? And is it one and done, one prayer, get up, he's going to change? No. But like Julia said, we're warriors for our family legacy. And I love what you say, Julia, is that God is sovereign over our marriages. And if anyone is treating us wrongly, God will defend it.
Yeah.
Yes.
God will strengthen us, and He will empower us so that we can always have peace of mind that we're walking in step with God regarding that.
I love that. That's so important, because I think one of the things that I can just hear, as we're listening, how that. One of the things that I could hear someone processing as they hear you speaking, which is so true, is like, well, like, yeah, what if, like, my husband, in this case, is not responding in a godly manner? What if I haven't seen movement? Like, what is my part? And I think, because you asked us, I think one of the most beautiful things is the fact that God calls us to be very, very honest before Him. He never calls us to shove anything under the rug that's not from Him.
Right.
Actually, that just makes it worse, and it will pop and actually explode later on.
Yes.
He doesn't call us to that. But God is our greatest confidant. He's our greatest advocate. He's our greatest defender. And I think that knowing God's heart and character gives us so much peace and allows us to love our husbands freely.
Yes.
Because I know I'm not going to love perfectly. My husband, of course, isn't going to love perfectly, because we're two imperfect people who love the Lord, who are choosing one another and putting Christ first.
Yes.
And of course that's going to happen. But I think knowing that God sees all, that He knows all, that He knows down to the intentions of our hearts, and that nothing escapes His eye, that He will take action. God is very active in our marriage. And I think that is a huge lie that we hear in culture, is like, well, in order to have a godly marriage, you need to put your head down, you need to not vocalize anything.
Yes.
And
submit.
Yeah, and that's a huge lie that we hear.
Right.
But it's in fact the opposite. And I believe it takes more courage and boldness to go to God in prayer for the best next step, and then actually take that step. And that might be vocalizing to your husband, hey, this is how I'm feeling.
That's right.
Very honestly.
That's right.
Let's talk about the practicalities of how we can approach.
Right.
I don't want to cut you off first.
No, but Alexis, how do you want to chime in on any of it?
I love the idea of us talking about a more practical approach on how we can maybe better communicate to our husbands the needs that we are feeling that are unmet.
Yes.
Or maybe some hurts that we might be carrying.
Okay.
What do you think is the best way to approach that in a way that is a godly way? And I actually do want to, before we ask that to you, I just remembered that, and I love telling people this. When I just first got married, I remember you telling me that we are not, as wives, your husband's Holy Spirit. You are not the Holy Spirit. And that always put me in check of like, okay, because sometimes we can be over communicators, we need to tell everything that's on our mind all the time.
Yeah.
And that's not always wise. And I
Right.
remember you sharing that with me.
Yes.
Because I am a verbal processor. I want to talk it out.
Yes, which is good.
Which is good.
Yes.
But I loved that advice and wisdom of, we're not their Holy Spirit.
Right.
We're not God in their lives. They have their own relationship
Yes.
with God. And
Yes.
the Holy Spirit has the ability to talk to them
I
on
love
a very
that.
personal level that we could never get through
Exactly.
if it were ourselves. And I think that every time I need to communicate something, I always think about that. And I feel like that is such a wise thing. Okay, am I trying to be the Holy Spirit? Am
That's
I trying
right.
to teach them a lesson
Right.
versus honestly just communicate maybe a need or desire?
Exactly. Well, I got excited when I heard that question because I have been mentored for about 25 to 30 years by a very close friend. Her name is Corrine, and we prayed almost every day for 25 years for our husbands and our children. And how she would mentor me is she would always say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. To your point, girls, you should not be holding anything back. That's unhealthy. It's unwise. I feel that's oppressive. One of the things that my husband loves about me is that I'm very strong. But I want to use my strength not to put him down, but to use my strength to build up my family and to strengthen my family. And one way to strengthen my family is first of all, my tone with my husband, being honest with him, and how I say it. Now, every wife, I'm sure that's listening, we have had blowouts. We've had blowouts. That is going to happen because you're human. That's normal. But what do you do afterwards? It takes humility to be a wife because I feel there's so many times where my pride would stand in the way of me moving towards my husband and asking for forgiveness. I want him to ask it first, or, I justify why I'm not. But whenever I am humble before my husband and I say, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry what I said. I'm sorry how I said it.
Yeah.
And that it's music to my husband's ears. And we're able to come together and we're able to use our hearts and our minds to talk it out.
Yeah.
And I feel
put
like
the guns down.
Yes, it's because when you're a strong woman, and I know both of you are very strong women, I'm a strong woman, sometimes you do have to put the guns down, put your hands up, and step back, walk back. That's the wisest thing you could do.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, as that little girl behind that seat, do you really want to hear that banter back and forth?
No.
You don't. You don't want to hear that. So I've always said, if you really love your children, you're going to love their father. Mm-hmm. If you really do. And it takes a strong, wise, intelligent woman to do that because we get our feelings hurt. Mm-hmm. We don't feel like it all the time, to be kind. Or it's not just about being kind and sugary. It's about being wise and leading your household, in a way that's productive. There's a scripture that says, a wise woman builds up her home, but a foolish woman tears it down with her own hands. Yeah. So how I think of that is just being negligent in how you act.
Right.
Just being negligent. Thinking it doesn't matter.
Yeah, only thinking of self.
And I got to say this, is that every day you think, especially when you're raising children, and Julia, you're going to experience that when you're raising children, it's like, does God see me right now? Everybody's out of the house, doing at work or at school, and I'm here picking up dirty cereal plates, folding clothes, washing dishes. Does God see that? He sees that. He sees that. That is extremely important to God. And all those little acts of kindness that you do every day as a mother or as a wife, it builds up. Mm-hmm. And before you know it, 1 year turns into 2 years. Yeah. 2 years turns into 10 years. Right. Yeah. 10 years turns into 40 years. And you could look back and you have a legacy of tenderness and of kindness that you could pass on to your children. Like I said, it's not going to be perfect. Yeah. It's not going to be perfect. But those are my thoughts on that.
I love that. Okay, Mom, I love all the advice you have been sharing and wisdom. And I want to ask you about how you handle expectations.
I would first say that all the women in the world have expectations. And that is good to have expectations. Right. It's good to have goals and expectations. But it's also important not to feel like you have to have control of those expectations. Right. I was sharing with you how I came into marriage at 20 and I wanted to treat my husband like a king. Yeah. My expectations is that I was going to have the perfect marriage in my mind. But then reality sets in. Right. Because your husband comes in and he might not have those expectations that I have. Because as you know, as a wife, husband and wife they think completely differently. And they go about life differently. And so how do you handle that without losing the momentum of trying to build your marriage? That's a really, really good question. Can I ask you, Julia, how you've handled that being young in marriage at 1 year?
Wow.
Yeah, because I know that.
You guys
I know that a lot of girls who maybe are not married yet have an expectation.
Yeah,
that's true.
Totally. I think that one of the things I've learned in marriage is that I have to own my own part of being self-aware enough to know what those expectations are, and that's not on my husband.
That's good.
And I think that we as women can, we can get resentful, in or out of the marriage about these unmet expectations that we haven't vocalized. And so the part that we can own is that, is honestly asking God for help to realize those expectations that we have that maybe we didn't even know we put on our husband, that, we haven't vocalized, but we don't even know that we have been needing them. And so that is something that I've been learning, is that we're safe to discover those before God and bring them before our husbands lovingly. Yes. So that's what I would say.
I love that. I feel like when you're talking something like a practical way we can do that, I feel like would be a fun exercise to do with your spouse.
Yeah, that's good.
Even just you both journaling or do something one night where you write maybe and ask God, okay, God, what are some expectations that I have in my own heart that maybe I've never shared with my spouse? And they do the same, and then you guys can prayerfully talk over what you've written down.
It's so good.
That kind of seems like a fun way.
That's so good.
Fun twist.
It is
to
true.
Kind of meet that need.
It is true.
Because you're also involving their expectations.
That's right. And I think it's important to always have in the back of your mind is that your husband's not the enemy, and for the man, your wife's not the enemy. Yeah. Is that you both are in this together, and that if you approach him with a tender heart, he I feel can put down his defense mechanisms and want to lovingly work it out with you together. Right. But if you come accusing and talking in a way that disrespects them, they're going to put their wall up and they're going to be defensive. But the bottom line is that knowing our husbands, like I do, is that most men want to please their wife. Yeah. As they say, a healthy man. Yeah. A happy wife is a happy life. It's true. And I feel like the woman could really be crucial in how she approaches those disappointments. Yeah. Because in a healthy man, he wants to please his wife. Totally. He wants to do it. So how you approach it is so important. I like what you said, Alexis, is doing it as an exercise. Like you're both.
Yeah, make it fun, maybe. That's right. A fun way to approach it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I love that.
That's so good. Yeah. Mom, I'd love to talk about ways that we can practically guard our marriages.
Ooh.
You talk about
this one hits.
Mom, can you share about the scripture about marriage being honored?
Yes.
And kind of your heart for men and women feeling empowered to put up boundaries to guard their marriage confidently.
Yes. Well, let's just say, Mom looks for that. My mom, and I would say my dad too, both have, this is very important. And a legacy that I feel like you guys have passed on to us and really taught us the importance of guarding your marriage and not being naive about
right.
External forces.
Exactly.
at war with marriage. It feels like at times, and I feel like I feel lucky that was a lot of the conversations we've had in preparing for marriage was about the importance of safeguarding your marriage, but not a lot of people have had similar conversations before, and so they enter marriage and it's shocking.
That's a big
because
yes.
it's like maybe that was important to you subconsciously, but maybe your spouse is not even aware of them at all.
That's right. Okay.
Or we're raised differently.
Exactly. Well, again, let me take you, if you come along with me from my perspective.
Yeah.
Coming from that little girl,
Right.
looking in the back seat,
Right.
I'm coming where I am going to fight for a good marriage.
Right.
I'm going to do everything I can for a good marriage
Right.
with God's help.
Yeah.
Now, there's some forces that you can't control, and only God can control that. But as long as it depends on me,
Right. What you can do.
my heart is to safeguard my marriage.
Yeah.
That has been my husband and on our heart, because we want to be married and give a legacy to our children.
Yeah.
We want to do that. So first of all, I wanted to share this scripture. It's in Hebrews 13:4. It says, marriage should be honored by all and the marriage bed kept pure. It's not only what other people think, but sometimes our kindness or our husband kindness towards the opposite sex can be taken wrong.
Yeah.
And that, you don't even want to start that at all.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Alexa, you have something to say?
I love this.
So, my husband, he works in the business field, and so he works with a lot of women, a lot of men, and one of the things that we've set as a healthy boundary, and again, it's not out of insecurity.
Right.
It's not out of jealousy. It's
Or
out
fear.
or fear.
Yeah.
A good point. Out of fear. It's out of wisdom.
Yeah.
Of honoring our marriage above all others.
Yes. I feel like there needs to be a breath there, because I think that's where it's misconstrued a lot. It's, oh, this couple has these boundaries, or this woman doesn't like da-da-da-da-da. She must be super insecure. She must not feel safe in her marriage.
Right.
And that's not true.
It's
at
not true.
all.
Yes.
It's just wisdom.
Yes. Exactly. And now,
Yeah.
Alexis and Julia, I am sure that there has been women that have turned the wheel and they are jealous.
Right, of
And
course.
they are not doing the right thing, okay, by being controlling, oppressive, and possessive.
Yeah.
We're not talking about that. But so what my husband and I do is that we talk about that when he deals with someone of the opposite sex, it's completely professional. Right. And what does that look like? It means it doesn't turn into familiarity. When you step over to familiarity, it could be dangerous. Depending on who that person is, because you don't know if that other person is vulnerable. You don't know if they've had a hard time in their marriage, or if they're being neglected. And so you want to be careful and safeguard your marriage, and just putting in those precautions.
Yeah.
I always mention this, but you know the Billy Graham rule?
Yeah.
The Billy Graham rule is that he said, now, I will not be with another woman without someone else being there. It's just a rule.
Just safeguard.
We safeguard, not because he felt tempted or his wife was jealous. It's just wisdom.
Yeah.
And I know that Rick Warren does that too, doesn't he?
totally.
He's
Yeah.
very wise when it.
It's so admirable.
Yes.
And I think there's two things that come to mind as we talk about safeguarding marriages. And one of them is the communal, what's the word? Communal accountability. That's the word. The communal accountability of like having safe, trustworthy people that you can confide in and saying, hey, I'm feeling this way. I feel like this is going on. Can you pray with me? Can you keep me accountable? There's safety in that.
Yes.
And I think the other thing is us being self-aware enough to know what are the things that have us flattered, because you know sometimes we're so focused on our spouse not doing something, and guess what, sometimes that can be an unguarded space.
Yes.
We're not thinking, oh, you know what, I can admit, you know, we're all capable of the worst sin, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I also need to be wise.
Exactly,
and aware.
Julia.
So what is that? Can you speak to a little bit more to that?
To women.
I'll speak to women. Is every woman knows when maybe the opposite sex has taken one step towards you. It's unspoken. It's something that you don't speak about, but you feel it. And women, again, have to be intelligent to know. It's like, I didn't have my guard up. And sometimes you just have to go cold.
It's
Yeah.
true.
cold, straight face, and you just have to back off. Julia, you have a perfect example. I would love to hear you share that. Listen to this, Alexis.
I love this story because I think it's so real. She's so real for sharing it. It was a woman on social media. Her whole ministry is to encourage wives to build up their marriages. And she shared publicly that it was a time in her marriage where her and her husband were raising, I think it was 4 to 5 kids. And they didn't have a lot of time with one another. So, I'll just leave that there. And then one of her children had to go find a new doctor, and actually all the rest of her kids were going to be transferred over to this new doctor. So she has a child on her hip and the rest of her kids following along, and they go to this doctor appointment, and the doctor comes in and she's like thinking to herself, is that the doctor? Who's that? And so she just kind of thinks that in her head.
Because he was handsome?
He was really handsome. She said, okay, that's fine. But what happened next was really interesting. Is she says that he turned to her and in a very almost intimate manner, he told her, I wish my wife wanted to have as many kids as you do. Okay, pause there. She goes, I had a choice in that moment.
Yes.
Okay, am I going to continue this conversation with this very handsome doctor? Continue the combo? Or am I going to change it? So she shifted. She changed the conversation. She left that doctor's appointment knowing that she'd have to bring her other kids that she transferred to this office eventually over in the following months. She found herself really thinking about this doctor and what he said over and over again.
That's an impression.
She was flattered.
Yeah.
Okay, keyword flattered. And she's told herself, is this how affairs start?
Yeah.
And so she made a decision between her and God. And she said, am I going to continue going to this doctor's office and just kind of like shove it under the rug and just pretend that it didn't have an impact on me when I really know it did? Or am I going to seem drastic and dramatic to others and actually change the doctor's office? She changed the doctor's office. And she shared, she goes, I believe in being ruthless about protecting my marriage, even if it comes at the cost at looking ridiculous to others.
Thank you.
That's so good.
That's
a really
that
cool.
is powerful.
Yeah.
So I hope whoever's listening feels the permission that if she feels something in her heart that she needs to talk to her husband about, or that something in her heart about her personally, that she would feel like I can be dramatic about this.
Yeah. Snip.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a great example.
And I love too, and this is what the blessing of being of the marriage unit is, that we could share these intimate conversations with our husbands, and it's so healthy when you do, because then when you go as a couple out into the world, people see that there is a strong connection there.
They're on the same wavelength.
They're on the same wavelength. That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful. And it's another friend of mine, I loved it. She said just standing next to her husband neutralizes situations. Being present. And I really believe in that, ladies, is that there's so many opportunities we can be practical in our marriage. As simple as this. My husband's saying, I'm going to go get gas in the car. I say, I'll go with you. There's so many practical ways. Well, maybe I would rather stay home and put my feet up. But if I make those decisions for 40 years, all the time, every day, we wouldn't be as close as we are now.
Right.
Truly, we wouldn't be.
And it's not out of
no
paranoia or
no,
any of that, because I can attest to that.
Yes.
It is just a desire to be
near
to your husband, like you were when you're first dating. You always want to be with them.
You always want to be with them, and I believe in that.
The motive is pure.
I believe in the ministry of being present with your husband.
It's true.
Because you don't want your husband to get used to not having you there. You want him to miss you when you're gone. You want him to miss your smell, your kindness, your touch. And so, like I said, and this may sound very, what's the word? Very old school. But it's a very wise, just to keep in the back of your mind. Just keep it in the back of your mind.
It's funny too, because sometimes we'll have these conversations, Mom, and me and Julia will look at each other, maybe eye roll a little bit. But pay attention to that where you eye roll, because that's
Yes.
probably exactly what you need to
good.
hear, because it's true.
Yes. Yes.
Some of these do feel very old school, not progressive,
Right.
not because the culture now is, especially what I'm seeing online, is it's about me. I'm a passenger princess. If he doesn't care about my needs, then
Right.
screw him.
Yes.
That
Yes.
is
Yeah.
literally the culture that our
Yes.
kids are being raised under, that we are constantly hearing. And if you constantly hear something over and over and over again, you're going to start to believe that,
Yeah.
whether it's truth or not truth. And so I find that see that as a very important thing, that we need to not disregard what we think is old school
Yes.
just because maybe it bothers us.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of wisdom in what these people, these people.
These old timers.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's people who have lived experience. We sometimes, I see the young people these days, they throw and disregard lived experience for what maybe feels right to them in the moment. And maybe some of it's good, but some of it's not good. And I'm so grateful that we have an example of someone who has lived experience, because it's not like this beautiful, like tied with a bow
Right.
experience where it's just everything's fine, everything.
Yes.
It's not.
Right.
It's real.
It's real. And
It's real and weighted, and
Yes.
it's grounding to hear. Yeah, sometimes life is extremely hard, and these conversations with my husband are painful, but I'm so glad that I had them, and I'm so glad we walked through all of this hardship and struggles, and sometimes it's external forces and circumstances.
Yes.
And not always relational circumstances,
Right.
but I'm so glad that we locked arms together and didn't abandon the ship.
that's right.
That, I think, is
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to empower women,
Yeah.
strong women. Doing what we talked about takes strength.
it
Yeah,
does.
it does.
Takes humility.
Yeah.
And there is a reward
Right.
in it.
Okay, well, speak to then. I know you're passionate about this because you talked about you're going on 40 years this year of marriage. The idea,
Seriously.
40 years.
It's amazing.
That is insane. But can you talk to the point of, there's obviously new love, fresh love, where we've all experienced that a beautiful, whimsical time. Then there's things you go through, and so the experience of that new love to the transition of old, tested love. Only the people who have gotten there know, because a lot of people do abandon ship, and they don't get to experience maybe that old love that is beautiful, and I've heard it's
Yes.
even better than the new love.
That's so true. I've heard someone say that there's nothing more beautiful than old love. And I have to attest to it. It is beautiful. You know, girls, you've always seen your mom always try to look nice for your dad.
Yeah.
In whatever stage I'm in, no matter what age I'm in, whether I have children that are small, I've always tried to make an effort.
Every single night, she would get dolled up.
To look, because how I feel like he's made a commitment to be only with me, the only woman that he's made a commitment to me. And I want to be a blessing to him. I want to look nice
For yourself too.
for myself,
Yeah.
because I feel confident when I look nice. But I could say that the things that my husband's seen me in, the states that he's seen me in my ugliest, personality-wise, and also physically.
Your weakest.
He's seen me in my
Physically?
weakness physically. And when I look back to the 40 years, I can truly tell you this. I love him more and I respect him more than when I was giddy in love with him. And when we get up in the morning, you know, our hair is all crazy. And literally, the age that we are, we limp out of bed because our joints. But the love that we have built on is so beautiful. And it doesn't just happen. And I think that's why we're having this conversation.
Right.
It's every day making the choice of choosing to follow God's blueprint. And that is men to cherish and love their wives, and for women to respect their husbands. And it's not, I know that that's not popular, like you said, in this day and age, it sounds so old school. Those are God's blueprints.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that that blueprint for those who are thinking of getting married, that blueprint will always work. The man cherishing the woman and the wife respecting her husband. Now, I know that there's times where the man is not cherishing the wife, and I've had that experience. I'm sure you have. I don't feel cherished at times, but it's following that blueprint. It's coming back to that blueprint that is important, and having the humility to stay in the fight, and not grow discouraged or saying, forget it. And another thing I'd like to say is how you speak about your husband to your friends, or how your friends speak about their husband to you, really impacts you. You don't think it does, but it does. Because when I'm around someone who thinks highly of her husband, it makes me a better person. I want to go and love my husband better. But if I'm around someone who doesn't respect their husband, all of a sudden I can see, oh, I see those flaws too. You know?
Yeah, totally.
And so it's important to safeguard that too. It's important to never badmouth your husband to anyone. Now, if you have a confidant friend and you want to share that with, so you can pray about it, that's different. I'm talking about just complaining about him to others. That is wrong. For you, for your sake. For your sake, that's wrong. And for him. And that's not building a legacy of a marriage.
I saw this couple online that they made a commitment to each other that they would never speak poorly about each other to even their closest friend, to their parents.
That's good, yes.
Either they don't talk anything bad about them.
Wow, that's powerful.
So I loved that, but that takes a lot of strength to also.
It is.
Because what they said it does for them is it forces them to talk about it with each other.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
And it stays there, and then they have a beautiful unit.
That is, and I do want to share it once again, and I'm speaking from my weakness, is I had a friend, I mentioned Corrine, and I asked her if she would pray every day with me for my husband. And I could tell you that that friend of mine knows everything of my soul because I trusted her. There's not many friends that you can trust with that. And that's what you have to be careful about. Is you ask God for a friend that you can bear each other's soul to one another. It's a relationship made in heaven, truly. Why? So that you can just complain and bash your husbands? No, it's so that you could cover them in prayer, because the Bible says that love covers. Love doesn't expose them. Love covers them. And I would say that that has been what gave traction to our marriage, is I poured out my soul to her, and then we both poured out our souls to God in prayer, and vice versa. I know things that no one knows. I'll take it to my grave. She knows things that she'll take it to her grave.
I love that.
That has been a gift
That is a gift
that God has given us.
I feel like, too, if someone can't find that, I found that, I have great friends, but I found comfort even going to therapy and having them be a very safe person to be able to. And what I've also learned is that not everything is beneficial to share with our husband, because I might, like you said, just be complaining. Literally, I just need to get off my chest. And if I constantly did that to my husband, he doesn't deserve that. I don't deserve that. I don't want him giving every little thing, every little thought to me. Oh, I don't like this. No, I don't need that. Sometimes I just literally need to share it to someone and it to disappear. Disappear. I don't care anymore. After I shared it, it was just something that I wanted to get off my chest, an annoyance that I had, but I really don't care about.
That's right.
That's also another place people can go to.
That's right.
So I just want to pause real quick, because everything we've said in this podcast so far has really been pointed towards women who are not in an abusive relationship or marriage. And so we wanted to pause because there might be some people here listening that may be in an abusive marriage. So what do you have to say to those people?
Okay, I wanted to say this very clearly, is that God hates that you're in an abusive marriage. God dislikes it greatly, and he does not want you to be in an abusive relationship. That is what I clearly want to say. what we are talking about, to your point, is not women who are in abusive relationships. Yeah. I wanted to share that. I'll just share an example in my life, is that sometimes you could be married and you could maybe feel sometimes disappointed. And in those times, it's really important to go to God because He knows all things. And I remember one particular time that I went to God in the middle of the night and I prayed to Him. And I poured out my heart to Him. And I heard God speak back to me. And these were the words. It was, your husband is going to be a great man of God. Go and lie next to him. Now, I am so glad that I went to Him, to God, because God sees treasures in our husbands that we don't see. And that's the point that I wanted to share, is that you have a God, a King, that you can go to that sees everything. And He saw a treasure in my husband that was yet to come. And to your point, Alexis and Julia, is that we are all a work in process.
Yeah.
And you said something about how important it is to be patient, to let God work.
Well, yeah, I think even if we take the lens off of our husband for a second and think about us, we're not perfect. And who my husband married when we were 22, I am not that person anymore. And I've grown, thank God.
Yes.
And he's grown. And another quote that I loved from Tim Keller's book, The Meaning of Marriage, I loved that he was saying, when we're falling in love, as a believer, as a Christians who are looking at potential partners, what you're really wanting to see in them is not a perfect person,
right?
But what you're really wanting to see is the potential. And so I love this quote that he says is, I see who God is making you, and it excites me. I want to be a part of that. I want to partner with you and God in this journey that you are taking to His throne. And when we get there, I will look at your magnificence and say, I always knew you could be like this. I got glimpses of it on earth. And now look at you. And that's basically how this happened. But I love that because that to me says, because I think looking for potential, we could have these crazy ideals and that person might never be that person. But I think what they're saying is not crazy ideals. What they're saying is, I see it in you now.
Yes.
So I think that's important to speak to people who are maybe looking for partners right now. It's you need to see it.
Yes.
God, right here, He's saying, I see it in you. It's not always perfectly clear, and maybe God has to speak to you, Mom, like God did to you, but you get glimpses of who they may be one day. And I think that's important to recognize.
It is important because there's so much that women go through. We get tired, we get weary, and sometimes that kind of skews our vision of our marriages. And when you go to God, and He gives you peaks and visions of, like you said, Alexis, of the magnificence of who this person is going to be, and He wants you to partner in that with God, it's a glorious thing.
Yeah, and it's their duty as well to partner with God for us.
Exactly.
To see the potential in us. And there's something so beautiful in relationships where both of the spouses are being cheered on by each other. I think that is like honestly the utmost goal. It's like I want to see me cheering on Ryan and helping prop him up and help supporting him, and I desire that as well.
Yes.
Sometimes it's different seasons, and that doesn't always. We're not always both doing what we want. In those seasons. But the desire to want to cheer the other on.
That is. I'm so glad you said that, Alexis.
Spiritually, emotionally,
physically. That is beautiful in God's eyes.
Yeah, that's so
beautiful in God's eyes.
Can I ask a question for those who are listening who want to get married? Feel like that is something God's called them to, but maybe haven't met their person yet and are seeking that. What are some characteristic traits that they should look for?
Well, I'll just say one, and then Alexis, I want you to say it. I remember you sitting at the kitchen table, Julia, and we would talk about marriage and talk about the person, whoever that person is, and your dad and I would say, it has to be a man that you can respect.
Yeah.
Because that is crucial in a marriage. If you find a man, after, of course, a man who loves God, follows him, can you respect him? So that is what I give, is that if you're dating someone, ask yourself, can I respect him? Not just now, but to the end of time.
Yeah. For me and with Ryan, something that was always important to me is I wanted to feel safe. I wanted to feel safe, and I think at the time, I remember just really wanting to feel like I could be myself and be fully known and loved. And when I remember I never felt that. I just felt like something was always off, or they'd have great qualities, but never the full deal, you know? And I'm sure people out there are like, you shouldn't settle at all. And maybe some of you are settling. And you're like, why don't they have these qualities? I'm annoyed. When I met Ryan the first time, you know, when we went on our first date, I barely knew him truly, like actually known this person. I knew of him. And I hugged him, and I was like, it was this supernatural thing. I was like, I felt like I finally was able to breathe. I honestly felt that way, where I was like, okay, I found my person.
Wow.
I felt safe. I felt so safe and like truly like a soulmate. And it's almost undescribable, but I think for me, safety with my emotions.
That's good, Alexis.
I think, and I think too, now in hindsight, gosh, Ryan and I have seen a lot and I've gone through a lot. And it's only been 10 years. 10 years has flown by.
Wow.
Right.
Like I understand how 20 years goes by so fast.
Yes.
And you're like, what happened?
What? Right.
10 years has gone by like this, but in that time it has been so concentrated. And so you really want a partner who is going to be there for you in the thick and the thin. Because there's been times where we're great, happy, life's wonderful and a bliss. But there's also been a lot of times where life was terribly hard.
Yeah.
And extremely unstable. And health issues and emotional, just like distress. And I can proudly say that Ryan has been there for me through it all.
That's beautiful.
And we've grown closer because of it and grown in better knowledge of ourselves. And I've been there for him in his hardest times too.
That's right.
You want to be able to be in those moments with someone that you can trust with your emotions,
that is
stability, everything.
You know, that's a great point. I don't know if you remember, girls, what I said at your wedding, Julia. I said relationships last not because of the good times. Relationships last because the hard times are handled with love and with care. And that is so true, and that's what you're speaking to. What you probably love Ryan so much, and you too, Julia, what you love Landon so much, is that when you were on your hard times, he was like a rock for you. He was a rock. And the good times is great. But that's not what you remember.
No.
You don't remember those times. It's the hard times and how they responded to you.
Just to add on to what you guys are saying, like with Landon, his character is what is so attractive to me beyond everything else. But his character is something I was really paying attention to when we were dating. We were long distance, and so when we did have time together, and even on the phone, I was in the back of my mind, I was thinking the character of this man. And that has been one of the biggest blessings to our marriage. And I always ask when people, you know, when in this past first year of marriage, they'd see us for the first time, they said, how's it going? You know, you guys still like each other, that whole thing. And I'd share, you know, one of the biggest joys of this first year of marriage is getting to see the character of the man I fell in love with up close every single day. And it's looking for how do they speak to the person who can't offer them anything in return. How do they handle their big emotions, including anger, including sadness? What do they turn to? Who do they turn to? How do they approach resolving conflict? How do they steward their finances? Are they, you know, are they safe? Can you trust their way of going about the world? And you know, of course, the big values. But I just thank you for sharing that.
I love that, and I think it's important to say before we talk about something else is that's why a wife has to be very patient, and a husband's patient too, because we're all work in process.
Yeah.
We're a work in process, and if we are patient, we are going to see something magnificent
Yeah.
in our spouses. Because I know I do that. I see that in my husband now, and I know that you see that in your husbands with 1 year and 10 years married.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
I love what we were able to talk about today, Mom. It was,
too.
I feel like I feel refreshed and reminded of the beauty of being a wife and the beauty of being able to create a beautiful home, emotionally, spiritually, physically, we can create a beautiful home and space for our family. And I just feel like I gleaned a lot of wisdom from you today and every day, obviously, but I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful that we were able to capture this, and our prayer is that you guys were able to glean something that you can take away practically, and maybe just, like we always say, it's never huge changes. It's not like we have to go and
I agree.
tear down everything, but like making these little tweaks, it's never as bad or hard as we sometimes make it in our head. Maybe sometimes it's just a tiny little tweak of maybe, like you said, our tone.
It's true. And one last thing I'll say is the power of looking in your husband's eyes when they're talking.
That's true.
And keeping the focus on his eyes is a very powerful way of showing them that you love them and that they're valuable to you, and that you're willing to stop time at that point and just focus on them for that little bit. Maybe it's just half a minute, but that's important. Thank you for letting me share, and thank you for honoring me the way you both have. Like I said, I have made so many mistakes in my marriage, so many mistakes. So I'm coming from a place of weakness and how God has defended, protected, and covered it. And so that's where I want to leave it.
Yes. Well, we love you, and we want to thank you for your time.
Yeah, we love you so much.
I love you too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in.